The answer is that this is not about drugs. This is about regime change. And we also have the White House Chief of Staff on record saying that this is about regime change. It has nothing to do with drugs. Let's be perfectly clear. Only Congress has the power to declare war. The Trump administration's military escalation in the Caribbean is not only reckless, it is blatantly illegal. We cannot allow this kind of dangerous overreach to go unchecked. This brutal military campaign, which has killed more than 90 people, further threatens a region that has already been destabilized by decades of U.S. intervention. And it risks driving us into further war in Venezuela.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, the chairman of the National Security, Department of State, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee, Mr. Mario Diaz-Balart.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose this resolution, which limits the United States' ability to fight narco-terrorist traffickers in our own hemisphere, where we are most directly impacted. I just heard from the distinguished woman that these are fishermen. These are fishermen in these boats. Really? I guess we're supposed to not believe our own eyes when we see these boats loaded with narcotics coming to the United States and going to other countries. These are narco-terrorists that have been killing Americans by the thousands every single year through their poison. It's about time that we have a president who is taking the murdering and the poisoning of our youth seriously. So literally, Mr. Speaker, every time one of these narco boats is removed from the water, it literally is saving thousands of American lives. So let me refresh everybody's memory who we're dealing with and who the President and the United States is going after. They're going after narco-terrorist organizations such as Tren de Aragua, El Cartel de los Soles, Clan del Golfo, and MS-13, just to mention some of these dangerous cartels that kidnap and they maim and they poison our youth. And let's put it in perspective, Mr. Speaker. More Americans have died because of these narco cartels that are poisoning our youth than Americans we lost in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and Korea. They're staggering numbers. These cartels are responsible for the loss of lives of more Americans than ISIS and Al-Qaeda combined. These are terrorist organizations that are responsible for the death of our people. And I just also heard, upset about pressuring Maduro. President Maduro. Maduro is not a president. He's the head of a narco cartel that has taken over by force and by terror a great country, the country of Venezuela. This is a man who's under indictment. Let's vote this down and let's protect the American people and let's not defend the narco cartel drugs that are poisoning our people. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Maybe the gentleman who's from the National Security can tell me, since the chairman can't, can tell me why the President of the United States pardoned a narco-terrorist and the former President of Honduras. Maybe you can tell me why. I'm trying to get an answer. Nothing? You walking out? You got an answer for me? Why would the President of the United States pardon a convicted drug dealer, over 400 million tons, killing Americans? I got nothing. I now yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Washington, the esteemed member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Representative Pramila Jayapal.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of this measure to rein in President Trump's unlawful boat strikes. These strikes and Trump's naval blockade represent appalling violations of international law and Congress's constitutional authority to authorize the use of military force. Drug trafficking is a serious offense. Communities across the United States have seen the devastating impacts of addiction, but that does not give Donald Trump the right to go to war, to deploy military forces without congressional authority, to kill anyone against the laws of war. Drug trafficking cases should be handled in a courtroom. And listen, the majority's entire argument that this was so serious it required action without congressional approval is completely destroyed when the president himself just pardoned the former Honduran president who has been convicted by an American jury for moving about a drug trafficking scheme that moved about 4.5 billion doses of cocaine into the United States. Give me a break. It doesn't pass the laugh test. And by the way, if Donald Trump were serious about addressing the opioid epidemic, he would not have cut Medicaid funding. He would not have frozen $8 billion in funding for drug abuse and addiction. We have seen the disastrous impacts of attempted regime change in Latin America. The American people do not want another forever war. Vote yes on this resolution.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
And I would let Ms. Jayapal know that in her district, they've lost 237 people in the last year from overdose and had a number of people killed by MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, the president who's working to protect their people. And I'm now proud to yield 3 minutes to the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mr. Rogers of Alabama.
I thank the gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in strong opposition to this resolution. For decades, violent drug cartels have ravaged American communities. They've flooded our streets with deadly narcotics, and they've destabilized our hemisphere, creating openings for malign influence from China, Russia, and Iran. And year after year, they've killed thousands of Americans. We decided long ago that we would not tolerate threats to the American people from terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We shouldn't tolerate it from narco-terrorists either. Yesterday, the U.S. House of Representatives received a detailed briefing from the administration on Operation Southern Spear. We heard directly from Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, and General Kane. Their message was clear. Narco-terrorists are the single greatest threat in the Western Hemisphere. President Trump is acting decisively, lawfully, and within his authority as Commander-in-Chief. Our military is targeting known drug smuggling boats loaded with drugs and moving along well-established trafficking routes. Every strike is based on rigorous intelligence linking those boats to well-known narco-terrorists. Every strike undergoes a comprehensive legal review and complies with defined rules of engagement to ensure innocent civilians are not involved. The Armed Services Committee is notified of every strike and has been briefed on this operation several times. These strikes are lawful under U.S. law and international laws, and all actions are in compliance with the law of armed conflict. But most importantly, these strikes have dramatically reduced drug smuggling operations. Bottom line, Americans are safer today because of President Trump's actions. Let's not return to the old, failed playbook of treating our counterterrorist mission solely as a law enforcement matter. We tried that for decades, and it didn't work. It cost hundreds of thousands of American lives. I urge my colleagues to join me in protecting Americans by opposing this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
And again, I could offer the chairman, Mr. Rogers, the opportunity to tell me why the president pardoned these drug dealers. And I would also ask the chairman, I'm proud of this institution and who we are, a member of the House of Representatives, former chairman of the committee. Why don't we do hearings? Why can't we bring in the administration into the Foreign Affairs Committee and have them answer questions of members of Congress on what they're doing and why they're doing it? That's our job. That's our responsibility. Have we had one hearing on Venezuela, on drugs coming in? Not one. Have we brought anybody in from the administration? That's our jobs. Why don't we do our jobs? That's why we were elected. So I would hope that the chairman would have some hearings that we can discuss this as members of Congress. And with that, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, an original co-sponsor of this important resolution, Representative Ilhan Omar.
The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Ranking Member Meeks. May I answer that question for you, Mr. Meeks? The answer is that this is not about drugs. This is about regime change. And we also have the White House Chief of Staff on record saying that this is about regime change. It has nothing to do with drugs. I rise today in strong support of this resolution. I am proud to co-lead Ranking Member Meeks's effort and urge all of my colleagues to join us today in reasserting this body's constitutional authority on matters of war and peace. Because let's be perfectly clear, only Congress has the power to declare war. The Trump administration's military escalation in the Caribbean is not only reckless, it is blatantly illegal. We cannot allow this kind of dangerous overreach to go unchecked. Trump, a president who touts himself as a global peacemaker, has appointed himself as judge, jury, and executioner in the Western Hemisphere. This brutal military campaign, which has killed more than 90 people, further threatens a region that has already been destabilized by decades of US intervention. And it risks driving us into further war in Venezuela. The American people across the political spectrum have been clear that they do not want to fight and fund another war. With this vote, every member of Congress has the chance to show the American people where they stand.
Gentlemen,
Will they
your time has
enable
expired.
Trump's illegal lawmaking, or will they stand on the side of the Constitution?
30 more seconds.
Stand on the
Gentlemen,
side
your
of the
time has expired.
Constitution and put an end to this unauthorized use of military force. I urge all of my colleagues to uphold the separation of powers and pass this resolution. I yield back.